Welcome to this week's episode of Bleak. This week we're discussing the cases of Jodi Sanderholm, 19-year-old out of Arkansas, and 22-year-old Ally Lamont out of upstate New York. Well, hello, Amanda.
Hi, Laura. How's it going?
I'm pretty good. Kids are good. How are your children?
They are alive and well.
Good. As are
So
mine.
we are just this is episode 3 today that we're getting into here. Hope you guys have enjoyed the podcast thus far. We are still new at this.
Still getting our sea legs wet. Isn't that how they say it?
Your feet wet, yeah, something like.
Oh, okay. Your feet.
I think getting your sea legs and getting your feet wet are like two different sayings.
Getting your sea legs wet? I don't know that.
Yeah,
Those
are two different.
Oh, is that like if I'm gonna sail a boat? Maybe getting my sea legs wet.
It's not literal.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm unfamiliar, I guess, with the phrases, or I'm using them incorrectly.
It's all right. We're used to it. I'm just kidding.
Little true.
So this week we're going to be talking about some real terrible things.
Yes,
So,
I can't say there's much light at the end of this tunnel.
But, I think it's still a good thing to draw attention to.
It is.
These cases. I think both of these, I don't know much about Laura's, and Laura doesn't know much about mine, so our reactions are very organic.
Authentic.
Yes, that's a better word. So,
Natural.
I think both of these cases have not been widely covered. I mean, you can find information on them, but it isn't like Shanann Watts or
Charles Manson.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, something that's has tons of coverage, and I kind of feel like that's what I like to cover in general.
Yes.
If you have case suggestions, you can find me on Facebook and send me like a PM. But we are going to be making email address for case suggestions, and that should be ready by next week.
Yeah.
So if you want to suggest a case,
yes,
we would love to hear about that. So
feel free.
So yeah, I'm gonna go first this week. This is Amanda, by the way, if you don't know our voices yet. Apparently we have similar voices,
We
too.
do. It's
so that might
funny.
be hard for people that don't know us personally.
Yes.
They might be like, wow, I can't tell who's who. But I think there's a little bit of a distinction, hopefully, that you're able to kind of tell.
I have more of the rough smoker female voice, and you have more of the untouched.
I guess I would not have said that or thought that, but
I probably shouldn't have said that, but I did.
That's fine.
We're not perfect.
Nobody is. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump right into it here. So the murder I'm covering is of 22-year-old Ally Lamont. Now her full name is Elizabeth. It's spelled Allyzibeth. So it seems like her parents named her that with the intention of calling her Ally. It's a little unusual. When you look her up, it might be under Elizabeth, spelled that way, or Ally, but she went by Ally for sure. So this case happened in Saratoga County, which is just north of Albany, New York, and Gloversville. So this is upstate New York. Population of about 15,000.
Small.
So yeah, not huge at all. Ally was born and raised in Gloversville.
Okay.
So just some background on her. She's described as down to earth, and she has a very a very close-knit group of friends. So she wasn't like a social butterfly. She just kind of had her people. And,
right.
She had her like maybe 2 or 3 female friends, and then she had a boyfriend, but it was a relatively new relationship. Sure. And she was very close to her family. Okay. She has 3 sisters, and then her parents, she's close with her parents. Their names are Sherman is her dad, and Krista is her mom.
Okay.
So at the time of her homicide, she was living on her own, but with a roommate. And her roommate was a girl named Jenny Young. She was a childhood friend of Ally's. And at the time of that this happened, Ally did want to get a place of her own. Her friend Jenny had a child.
Oh, sure.
And so I just think not anything against, someone having a child and having a roommate, but I think
but
she
the
just...
dynamics of that.
Yeah.
She's a single young woman, and,
Yeah,
the children wake up in the night. Yeah, I understand.
Totally understandable. Yeah. So at that point, it wasn't that she was unhappy with Jenny or anything like that. It was just she wanted a place of her own.
Right.
So in March of 2019, Ally began working at a sub shop called Local Number 9. So for the purposes of this podcast, I might refer to it as Number 9 or the sub shop. But it was called Local Number 9, and it was, not far from her home. And at the time that this happened, she had worked there for about 6 months. On October 30th, 2019, the Gloversville Police Department gets a call inquiring about the whereabouts of Ally Lamont. And it was her sister who called. I don't have the name of her sister, but it was one of her 3 sisters that called.
They called to report it?
To report that they hadn't, she wanted to know, like, if they had gotten, she had been arrested or they had gotten another report about her or anything, because her sister was unable to get in contact with her.
Okay.
So they didn't get into a whole lot of why her sister was concerned, but then, so the police take down the report, not thinking much of it. It's a 22-year-old.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, they get another call from Jenny Young, her roommate.
Oh.
And her roommate tells police that she's concerned because Ally never came home the night before.
Oh.
And Jenny had seen Ally the evening before at the Local Number 9. So Ally had asked Jenny to drop off her phone charger.
Yeah.
So Jenny did that around 6:30. And then Jenny typically, so Ally didn't have a car. So Jenny would give her rides to and from work at times, but not all the time.
Right.
So Jenny had texted Ally in the, at work asking her if she needs a ride home, and Ally didn't respond. And she waits a little bit, and then she tries texting her again. And eventually, she texts her a total of 3 times and gets no response. So her assumption is, I'm guessing she doesn't need a ride.
Right.
And so she thought it was a little strange, but she's gotten rides home from different people in the past, and she had a boyfriend and stuff, so she just let it go. So the next morning, because Ally never came home, Jenny was a little more concerned by that next morning.
Right.
So she goes to the Local Number 9 and asks the manager if he had seen Ally, because she had last been at work as far as she knew. And then the manager basically just says, she's not scheduled to work today. And that was about it. He didn't have any other information. So the detective at this point is like, okay, now I have 2 people that are concerned. And so they are like, we should, look into this further. So the detective found out she had a boyfriend named William Dennings.
So, okay, so they find out that she has this boyfriend,
from Jenny.
From Jenny. So they're interviewed Jenny a little bit or talked to her. Or
yep,
something.
They talk to Jenny, and then they get this tip on that she's got a boyfriend. They're like, well, that's a logical place to start.
Right.
So after they get done talking to Jenny, they're like, let's go to William's house. So her boyfriend's a guy named William Dennings. And initially, when they get there, so no one comes to the door, but eventually, after they wait a little bit, a young man comes to the door, but he informs the detectives that he is actually William's brother, so they must live together.
Oh, sure.
And he said that William wasn't there, and he's not there because he was out looking for Ally. So he can't find her either.
Oh, okay.
So now they're like, okay, the boyfriend can't find her, the friend, her friends and can't find her, and her family can't find her.
Right.
So at this point, they're like, this is more serious.
Something's not right.
And the detective, they gave him a lot of credit because he did take it seriously from the get-go, which doesn't always happen.
Right. No, it definitely does not.
So they issued a BOLO, which is a be on the lookout for the state of New York. And this is Detective Simonson, and he was actually like a rookie detective. And so he is gathering all this information, and he takes his report to his sergeant, and then the sergeant agrees that, this really needs to be looked into much more seriously. Right. So then they start assigning some more detectives to her case. And they mentioned, they get hundreds of missing person complaints every year, just in general in this country. But they're mostly juveniles, and it is more unusual for an adult to go missing.
Right.
And, of course, the chances of a missing person or missing adult being found alive specifically, with the passage of time, that does decrease very drastically. Right. Whereas with a juvenile, that's not necessarily the case because they're more likely to run away.
And come back.
Exactly. So there was just a little bit more of urgency to this than there would be with a juvenile.
Right.
So the police at this point, they decide to re-interview Jenny because at that point she was the last person that they knew of that had seen her.
Right.
And they asked Jenny, they're like, what was her demeanor like when you dropped off the charger? And Jenny's like, she seemed completely fine. She's like, she was happy. She, Halloween was coming up, so they were talking about their Halloween plans. She was laughing, joking around, and totally in good spirits, like nothing unusual at all. So then the department receives a phone call saying that Ally had an ex-boyfriend named Tyler, and that there was a domestic incident in the past with Tyler.
Oh.
So, of course, that's a red flag.
Well, yeah.
And so they're like, well, let's try to find this Tyler guy. So they do first go to Tyler's house, and he's not there. But then after the detectives are on their way back from Tyler's house to check to see if he's there, they hear back from Ally's current boyfriend, William.
Right.
So it's starting to get a little confusing. So you've got the ex-boyfriend, Tyler, and then you have the current boyfriend, William.
Right.
So they're talking to William. I believe this was just a phone interview. And William tells them that they've been officially going out for 1 month. So this is a new relationship.
Pretty new.
And he said, but everything's going well. They hadn't had like a recent argument. William willingly shows the police his phone and all of his text messages that, from Ally, that he had corresponded with her. The last time he had talked to Ally was October 28th, 2019. And all of his text messages are corroborating his statements. And pretty much the text messages between the two were mostly small talk from the last time she had been at work. The last time she had been definitively seen, he had been talking to her via text, and it was nothing significant.
Right.
So they asked William what he did on the 28th of October, because at this point, October 28th is their last known sighting of her.
Right.
And he says he met up with some friends and they drank beers at a local cemetery.
Oh,
so
that's something that
that's a little different.
Raises a little eyebrow. Like, I love cemeteries. That's something to know about me. Absolutely love them. I don't drink alcohol, but if I were to, I would do that in a cemetery.
Yeah, and you're talking about, I don't know William's age, but he's not, if she's 22, I'm going to go ahead and guess he's not like a 50-year-old man. You never know.
You never know, but it isn't likely. He's probably in his early 20s, I would imagine.
And that was the vibe I got from
But when you tell police, like, hey, I was drinking in a local cemetery, that's my alibi.
Right.
Like, that does even.
So it is an odd thing to do, but he was very forthcoming about it.
Okay.
He wasn't like he was like, well, you know, he
yeah.
tried to lie and say he was doing something else.
I mean, that would be a strange thing to come up with suddenly.
Right. Like, why would you say
why
that?
would you say that if you were going to lie about where you were?
So his friends that he was with also backed him up on
that's
that.
Good.
And then he spent the night at a male friend's house.
Oh, not at the cemetery. Okay.
Yes, they just went there like for a period of time.
Okay.
And then he went back to his friend's house, and he seemed genuine from what the police could tell. You know, so at this point, no one's ruled out, but the boyfriend is not looking terribly suspicious.
Right.
So the detectives are kind of like, what do we do next here? So they decide to go to the local 9 sub shop, and they want to speak with Ally's manager because they're like, well, we know people that saw her at work. Let's get a kind of a rundown of the last time she worked.
Right.
So when detectives get to the number 9 sub shop, they see a sign on the door that said the shop was undergoing renovations but still open for business.
Okay.
And the detective didn't really know what to make of it. They weren't, you know, they thought it was maybe a little strange, but they had no reason to, you know, really question it too much. But they did think it was a little odd that they were...
Like the timing maybe was odd?
Yeah. Like the fact, so this girl's gone missing, she's last seen at this sub shop, and now the sub shop's under renovation.
Now we're going to renovate it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because they're aware probably that she's missing, and, you know, they're not,
So after they see that sign, the detectives see 2 individuals go to a dumpster right by the shop.
Well, that's not odd.
Which is kind of out back. And so they approach the 2 individuals, and they learn that they're both Local 9 employees. Oh, one of them is the girlfriend of the manager. Okay. And the manager's name is James Duffy.
Okay.
And the girlfriend says, they start asking, and the reason I'm calling her the girlfriend is because I never was able to get her name.
Okay, so she's the girlfriend of
James Duffy, the manager.
Okay.
So the girlfriend says she wasn't at the Local 9 on the 28th when Ally last worked, but she knew her boyfriend James had worked that day with Ally.
Okay.
So at this point, and she gives detectives James's phone number so they can talk to him. So at this time, and she asks, or the detective asks the girlfriend if James Duffy is available, and she informs them that he was going to be coming in at 10 o'clock that day. So this must have been 8, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right, so pretty early.
And so they're like, okay, so we know that we should be able to talk to this guy, you know, by 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So after that, they also find out that the shop is owned by a man named Georgios Kakavelos.
Okay.
He goes by George. I probably will refer to him as Kakavelos for the purposes of this. So detectives, they do try calling both men at this point. They want to talk to the owner and the manager.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And both men do not answer. And some time goes by, and they start to get the impression like that their calls are being avoided, maybe.
Right.
Because to me, you know, a missing person, there's some urgency there.
Right.
You know,
the police are calling,
and
you want to call them
and they've
back.
left messages, and now you've got a couple people not responding. It could mean something, it may not.
Right.
But at that point, they're a little bit kind of annoyed by it at the very least.
Right.
They also had, you know, shown up to both of their houses initially, and they weren't there. So at this point, they asked the New York State Police to get involved because the clock is ticking. It's a
small town, and they don't have probably those resources.
No, they definitely needed more help. So the local police kind of relay what's going on to the state police, and her friends and family are desperately searching for her at this point. So we're talking, so she'd been seen on the 29th, and this is going into the later hours of the 30th.
Okay.
And this happened quickly. They really got things going fast. They talk about the first 48.
Right.
So when you're going into the next day, they're starting to get more concerned and getting more resources on board.
Right. This is really fast. Like, usually it's...
Yeah, I think there was just a really, they really
knew something.
Commended their initial rookie detective for getting this going really fast. So they do end up getting a call back from Ally's ex-boyfriend, Tyler, at this point, and he does agree to go in for questioning.
Right.
So Tyler does have a criminal history. He's described as a bad boy. I don't know what his criminal history is exactly, but the police had some familiarity with him, and they wanted to know about their domestic abuse incident. Because there was a police report had been filed, and this was about 3 months prior.
Okay.
So Tyler admits that, yes, there had been a domestic incident, and Ally had sustained some minor injuries in that incident, but he does explain, so they had been together for 4 years at this point. For some reason, Ally thought Tyler was cheating on her, and she showed up to his house, and Tyler says she was very combative. And he said that combative to the point that he had to physically restrain her. And he said, so it wasn't that I, beat her up or hit her. It was literally like she was...
in his words, he was defending himself.
Right.
Kind of thing.
And that was actually backed up somewhat by the police report. Okay. And he said at that point that was the last straw for their relationship.
Right. It was over.
He said he blocked her on social media, blocked her cell phone number. So at that point they're like, well, at least that kind of makes a little more sense. They're still kind of suspicious of him just given his background, but they don't have anything to hold him on, so at that point he's free to go.
Okay.
And then, of course, detectives do learn that Ally had disappeared in the past, but more as a teenager, like running away type thing.
Sure.
And it was always resolved very quickly.
Okay.
And it was never more than like a day. So we're going now on 2 days, and she hadn't done it since she had been like an adult.
Right,
so,
right. Because what's the point in running away as an adult?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
People don't. Yeah.
And then her boyfriend, her current boyfriend, William, then does show up at the police station, and he tells police, he kind of is just like, something I didn't really mention before was she seemed a little depressed, and she wanted to get treatment for it, but she had no health insurance through her employer.
Okay.
So at that point, hearing that, they're concerned about suicide.
Right.
So, but at that point they hadn't found anything. She's just a missing persons. So later in the day on the 30th, police go back to the sub shop because they're like, well, the manager should be there by now. And when they get there, the manager and the owner are both there.
Oh.
And they start kind of trying to gather some information on this owner, and they find out that George Cacavelos had owned diners in the past.
Okay.
And he opened the local number 9 at the end of 2018.
Sure.
Described as an absent owner who wasn't there a lot. Now, that's not super unusual. The owners are not necessarily at shops very often.
Right.
So that's not a huge thing, in my opinion.
Not a red flag.
No.
Really. Yeah.
So James Duffy was acting as the manager, of day-to-day operations.
Right.
So the police are just trying to verify at that point, when did you guys last see Ally? Because they knew that when she last worked, both of them were there.
Right.
So the detectives at this point notice that James Duffy is acting abnormally. He's described as an odd character, out of sorts, frantic, very intoxicated.
Oh. At work?
At work.
At work, super intoxicated.
And the owner's there, and he's
And the
openly behaving this way. Now, if you look up this guy, his name is James Duffy. He is not somebody you'd think that would be managing anything, to be quite honest.
Sure.
It was like very kind of an odd guy.
Yeah.
So because Duffy is inebriated, essentially, investigators are like, well, we'll just talk to Cacavelos.
Right.
And then we'll have to get back to him.
We're not going to get much information from the inebriated, intoxicated manager.
So, Cacavelos explains he last saw Ally at the local number 9 on October 28th, which is kind of lining up with what everyone else is saying.
Right.
And then Cacavelos says Ally left early, and then he says he gave her a $500 loan. For a security deposit on an apartment, and Cacavelos had a handwritten note that said she was going to be paying him back, like a repayment agreement, in $50 increments per paycheck.
Okay.
I thought that was odd.
Well, it is odd. I mean, is that how they do it maybe there? Maybe he does that from time to time, gives them little
loans.
I
mean, it's not the weirdest thing in the world, but I don't know.
It's weird that it happened to happen on that day, and now he's got this handwritten letter.
Well, it was like his note. It was almost like a note to himself, reminding himself, like, I gave her $500. She agreed to pay me $50 every payday. Or or whatever. That's what it was. Okay. It wasn't necessarily like an agreement
per se,
but
she needed $500 and he was gonna.
He gave it to her.
Well, I mean, that was nice of him.
So investigators ask if they can search the restaurant, and he's completely agreeable to that. So they go in to the local number 9.
Yeah.
And they kind of are like taken aback because it's kind of a mess in there. Like, there's just crap everywhere. And Cacavelos explained that their soda machine had a leak in like one of the lines, and the syrup got everywhere.
Oh, ooh.
Like the soda syrup in the soda fountain.
So I could see that would be disgusting.
Yes. So employees are like cleaning the floors and the kitchen, but other than the disarray from the soda leak, they don't really find anything there.
Oh, sure.
So Duffy and Cacavelos, now being the last people that likely saw her, are asked if they're willing to go to the station for more questioning, like more official interview type stuff. And James Duffy, at this point, he's still very emotionally labile. He tells police
up and down,
he's an alcoholic and a drug addict.
Oh, he just lays it out there.
And he's like, but don't tell my boss. And he kind of chuckles.
Don't tell my boss. He's been around him completely hammered.
Exactly. It's just very strange guy.
Yes.
And then
So
he like just abruptly stands up and he's like, listen, I want you to find my friend.
Oh.
They're just like, okay.
So he's missing Ally too.
Apparently. So simultaneously they have other detectives interviewing Cacavelos.
Right.
And so Cacavelos kind of takes police through his last shift with Ally on the 28th.
Just press a button.
He explains that the soda machine line was accidentally cut, creating that huge mess. He says Ally was helping clean up that syrup situation, is what he referred to it as. And he said he made her stay late to help clean it up, and he said, she wasn't super thrilled about it. But,
right. Her age, probably wanted to
go do something else.
Yes.
But he did say that Ally left around 7:20 p.m. after that he gave her the $500 loan.
Oh.
And he wasn't, it was odd that he said 7:20. He said it was his best guess. And it's like, don't you have records of like people punching in and out?
Right.
So
or maybe they don't do that there. Maybe it's a small
could be
operation and you just kind of write it down.
I guess. So Cacavelos reports that he was worried about Ally going down the wrong path. He said he described her as a troubled girl.
Oh.
He says, I tried to help her, I tried to be a father to her, and that he felt bad for her, but he treated her like a daughter.
Oh.
Now, other than Cacavelos saying this, that's not really the vibe they're getting from other people. You know, there's the boyfriend saying, you know, she had been depressed a little bit, but not like going down the wrong path or hanging out with bad people.
Right.
So they were, you know, that was just his perspective. You know, maybe working with her day in and day out, he got another side to her. But he was very adamant that Ally was suicidal. So...
Well, it's strange that the one boyfriend had also said she could be suicidal.
Yes, and that's true. So now you've got another person kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But he was more adamant, I guess, about it, that she was suicidal. Oh. So then they ask Cacavelos if he thinks James Duffy, the manager, was involved in her disappearance. And Cacavelos says, and I quote, he says, I really don't think so. He doesn't have the balls.
Oh, okay.
So investigators asked to see James Duffy and Cacavelos' phone communications.
Right.
But Cacavelos, you know, he's kind of scrolling through his phone and showing investigators little tidbits on his phone.
Right.
But he won't let them actually, like,
take
it and review those conversations. And when the police asked him why, he said that he had a lot of private and personal information on his phone. And he made a comment about that him and, so Cacavelos and Duffy were, what was the word he used? Something about objectifying women or saying some bad things about women.
Oh, okay.
And so he was
slimy,
embarrassed about it or whatever.
Yeah, I bet.
So the police are kind of, and he was very adamant and kind of sticking up for James Duffy. You know, like, I really, really don't think he has anything to do with this.
Huh.
So the next morning, Halloween, the police decide they're going to conduct additional interviews. And at this point, they want to interview James Duffy, but not intoxicated.
Right.
So they show up at his home early in the morning to try to kind of get him before he starts drinking and doing drugs.
Okay.
Yeah. So...
Jeez, gotta get him really early, apparently.
Yeah. So at this point, they bring him down to the station. He's agreeable again to come down.
Okay.
And he's much easier to talk to at this point. He seems, you know, he's not all up and down and irrational and acting strange. He's just more, you know, he's just easier to talk to.
Right.
So he denies knowing where she is initially. He says, you know, I really want you to find her. And after hours and hours of interviewing him, he finally just seems on the verge. Like, the police are just getting the impression that
they know he knows
something.
Yeah.
And because of... So, the impression I get of James Duffy is that when he is sober, he's probably a decent person.
Right.
But when he's intoxicated... And, you know, because he drinks and does drugs and all these other things at the same time, he's kind of one of those people that you can get to do whatever you want.
Anything, yeah.
And he's one of those people that when he's under the influence, he's just way more unpredictable.
Right.
But he has a conscience when he's not under the influence type of a thing.
Right.
So, because he's sober in this interview, he finally says, okay, if I tell you what I know, I want a signed agreement from the DA that I won't be prosecuted.
Oh, pretty smart.
And
I would.
And he's like, I want witness protection, the whole deal.
Witness protection?
And the police are like...
Yeah, witness protection.
Yeah, that's... So clearly he knows something.
Right.
So police say, you know, it kind of depends on what occurred.
Right.
You know, if it was like she overdosed and then, it was an accident, that might be a possibility. But if you, like, murdered her and chopped her into pieces, that's a
Right.
whole other deal.
Right.
So all of a sudden, James Duffy kind of looks down, and the detective that was being interviewed in one of the documentaries I watched said he just had this evil chuckle. Just kind of...
Ooh.
And, at this point, he's in the interview room. He has a garbage can next to him like he's going to puke. He's lighting a cigarette. And then, quote, he says, "You don't even know." And then he repeats it again. He said, "You don't even know."
Jeez.
And they're like, okay, he's on the verge here.
Yes.
And then he's like, finally, he just was like, "I'll give you everything." And they're like, all right, let's go. Tell us what happened.
Let's get her done.
So Duffy just starts confessing at this point.
Even though he hasn't been given witness protection or
No,
anything.
and he's been read his rights and everything.
Right.
So he tells police that Cacavelos had come up with a plan to kill Ally because Ally was going to report him for fraud.
What?
Now, we'll get into this whole at the end. I will explain that further. But Cacavelos knew that Ally... So Cacavelos hadn't been running his store very ethically.
Okay.
And Ally had found out some information, and he was afraid she was going to turn him in. To
Why was he afraid of this?
So, what had happened, I guess I can explain it now, was the New York Department of Labor investigator came into the store a couple weeks before this happened. And they had been investigating Mr. Cacavelos because he had all these previous businesses and he owed like $700,000 in back taxes to the IRS.
Yeah, that's never
And
good.
he had been engaging in shady business practices, one of them being that he was underreporting hours.
Oh, okay.
So employees were not getting paid properly.
Right.
So Ally would work, 42 hours and might only get paid for 38 hours.
Right.
And
it's not good.
he was trying to do it in a way, I think, initially where, like, people wouldn't notice.
They weren't noticing.
But, of course, when you're working at a sub shop, probably not making a lot of money, you're
Right.
going to notice a few missing hours from your paycheck.
I would. I'd be like, hey, where's my money?
Right.
I work hard. Where's my money? Yes.
So they're like, she talks to the investigator and she's like, doesn't tell them really anything at that point, but so Ally's pretty good friends with James Duffy. She's close to him as a friend.
Right.
And even though he's her manager, he's her coworker.
And he's a drug addict.
Yes.
Alcoholic.
Yes.
But maybe they don't do that together. Maybe they just kind of
cross paths at work type of thing.
But they're close.
Right. So she makes the mistake, and I don't mean this in a way that I'm blaming her for what happened, because I'm obviously not, but of telling James, she's like, if things don't change around here, like, I'm going to tell these people from the Department of Labor everything. Because she's sick of not getting paid properly.
Right, of course. And she thinks she can talk to James. He's not going to, rat her out. Yeah.
So, of course, James tells Cacavelos everything.
Yes.
About what she told him.
Because he's completely...
hammered or whatever.
Hammered, yeah.
So James tells them that Cacavelos gave him $500 to do a whole bunch of drugs. To get him completely inebriated.
To get who inebriated?
So this is from the point of view of James Duffy.
Okay.
James Duffy is telling the police, Cacavelos gave me $500 to do a whole bunch of drugs.
Okay.
So that I would be in like a very inebriated state.
Okay.
And because he wanted James to kill Ally.
Okay.
And he knew that James would never do this unless he was totally
inebriated.
Inebriated.
Right.
So James describes, that he was building up the courage to do it, and as he got more and more hammered, that, it became easier and easier to consider it.
Right.
So he says, finally, once he worked up the courage, he says Ally was doing the dishes kind of in the corner of the shop. Cacavelos had made sure all the other workers had left the deli.
Ooh.
She tells Ally she needs to stay late to clean up the syrup mess, which they find out they had actually cut the syrup line.
Oh, to make
An
like...
excuse for her to stay, and when they're cleaning up blood evidence,
Right.
and you have all this syrup and stuff everywhere,
Right.
it makes it easier to cover it up.
Right. Well, pretty slick on their part because...
Yeah. It actually was fairly effective because when they searched the sub shop initially, they didn't find anything.
Syrup all over, and you don't know what's what.
And that's why I think the police were a little suspicious of it, but then they're like, well,
these things happen.
Things happen,
Yeah.
right? It could be a coincidence.
Right.
So Allie's doing the dishes, and James Duffy sneaks up on her from behind and starts beating her with a baseball bat.
Oh my gosh.
I know, this reminds me of
That story. What
the
was
Nicole Halpin with the baseball bat.
Yes. Oh.
It's like, how horrible is
what
that?
a terrible way to go.
I mean,
just how could you do that to somebody?
He describes smacking her in the head with the bat, and they're getting frustrated because she's not dying. So Cacavelos starts helping, and he starts choking her, and he puts a bag over her head, and they're both screaming, oh, she's not dying, she's not going down. Allie's screaming, kicking.
Of course.
So then, it just sounds horrific.
Awful.
So then Cacavelos tells James Duffy, he's like, go get the sledgehammer.
Oh my gosh, why...
So they both
They couldn't just bring it's a terrible thing to kill somebody, but...
Do you have to do it this way?
Do you have to do it like that?
I know.
Jeez.
Well, I suppose with gun evidence, they were worried about, tracking the gun to them.
I suppose.
Which is not an excuse. Pizza's here.
Oh, the sledgehammer just came out.
We're back from the pizza break here, so I don't know exactly where I left off, but they're taking turns hitting Ally with the sledgehammer at this point. They continue to choke her, bash her in the head, and she does eventually die.
Yes.
So, of course, at this point,
Awful.
they are left with this scene that need to be cleaned up. So they already had the soda lines, cut so that they could cover up the blood and whatnot. And this also is kind of they knew that there would be a cleanup taking place far beyond that one day, so it kind of justifies why they needed to do that. So it's like it was a genius plan, but at the same time, it raises suspicion.
Right.
So it kind of, if you think about it, it was not that you want someone to get murdered, but it was a good idea on their part for not getting caught, but yet it was almost like an oxymoron.
Right.
It raises suspicions.
Right, why is this all over the floor?
Yes.
But then at the same time, this is something that does happen in a restaurant, so...
And, Cacavelos had completely made up the story about giving her the $500.
Well...
And to try to make it seem like she took some cash and fled.
Right.
And then that was why he was so adamant about her being suicidal.
Right.
Is because he wanted them to think she committed suicide somewhere and they just couldn't find her.
Right. But what would you need $500 to commit suicide for?
Who knows? She got a bunch of drugs or something?
Oh.
I don't know. So another piece of the puzzle is the mess they had to clean up was more than Cacavelos and Duffy anticipated. So Cacavelos made a Walmart run that night to get more supplies. So they have him on surveillance at Walmart buying cleaning
Always
supplies.
at Walmart.
I know.
Did you ever notice always at Walmart?
Well, I think Walmart happens to be one of the few places open 24 hours anymore. I mean,
Well,
I guess
suppose.
grocery stores are, though, like
yeah,
Hub.
sometimes it's a grocery store, but usually it's Walmart.
Yeah, they've got decent prices. And no, we're
And
not
nobody
sponsored
questions
by
this.
Walmart.
No, well, no, we are not sponsored by Walmart, but
Or
doesn't-
anybody.
or
for that
anybody.
many.
So there we go. But the thing is, don't the employees of any late night establishment, question like when people are coming at 3 a.m. for certain items?
Yeah, like in
Shovel.
and a suitcase.
I need a suitcase and a shovel and garbage bags and
And I have to have it right now.
Right now, 3 a.m.
Well, you could just use the self checkout.
Nowadays, you could.
So that's probably
gonna
what I would
change things.
That's probably what I would do. Although I don't know if they have those open at night. I don't think they do.
I don't know that they do at that hour, but I'm not really sure. I don't.
Anyhow, so they ended up putting Ally's body in the back of Cacavelos's Volkswagen vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And they drove around and found a secluded area. They poured concrete over her body.
Jeez.
And they actually stopped at a few different places and they disposed of groups of evidence
Oh.
at different places.
Wow.
And so, of course, they ended up taking James Duffy. They arrested him, of course.
Well, yeah.
And they took him handcuffed and had him show the investigators where he left, or where they put the evidence.
Right.
And they ended up finding the baseball bat floating in a pond
Oh.
because they didn't take into consideration that bats float.
Right.
And then there were plastic bags in the woods that contained the cleaning supplies that they used. So that was in a separate area. And then lastly, Duffy took investigators to where her body was. And I guess the concrete actually made it, they had said it likely would not have been found if it wasn't for Duffy admitting to it.
Guilt. Wow. So they could have gotten away with it.
They could have. And that's the thing is, and James Duffy said that while he was digging Ally's grave, that Cacavelos had a bunch of cash and was, like, throwing it at him, like, and laughing. I mean, he's just a complete psychopath.
How did he have all this cash? He owed a bunch of people money.
Well,
No.
doesn't mean that he didn't hoard cash.
That's true.
So a lot of the detectives that worked on this case said, it was, of all the cases they've been involved in, it was probably the most heinous that they'd ever encountered.
Just poor girl, poor family, poor everybody.
So at this point, the police Cacavelos is unaware that Duffy has confessed.
Oh.
So they bring Cacavelos, or they start questioning him, and he's immediately kind of suspicious that something's going on because they read him his rights, which they hadn't done the first time. And he basically says, after they start kind of telling him what they know, he demands an attorney and refuses to talk. So both men were arrested on October 31st, 2019. James Duffy is 34 years old at this time, and Georgios Cacavelos is a 51-year-old.
Wow.
So no bail for either of them.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And James Duffy did end up testifying against Cacavelos.
Okay.
In exchange for some leniency. And they kind of described it as kind of a contract killing. Basically,
Kind of.
Cacavelos didn't want to do it himself, and he knew that Duffy could be manipulated into doing it.
Right. It was essentially a contract killing.
And the trial for this murder began on May 12th, 2020. It was described as complicated and long, just trying to get into all the nitty-gritty of it. And I know I kind of already got into Cacavelos' poor business practices and that he owed the IRS $700,000. But that all came up in the trial, obviously.
Yeah.
And when that investigator came to the sub shop from the New York Department of Labor, they were wanting to see payroll records.
Right.
So they already had some kind of idea that there was something
So
going
someone
on.
else might have even spilled the beans before she did.
And
before she was going
Ally
to.
hadn't, I don't think, had said anything at that point to the investigator. But she planned on reporting it all if things didn't change around there. And
Right.
one of the, I found this kind of memorable, is one of the detectives said, she just wanted to be paid appropriately.
Right.
Like, it's not like she was asking for a raise or,
Right. More
something,
money,
or something extravagant. She just wanted to be paid for the hours that she worked.
The right amount.
Yes.
Right. For the
It's
hours
like-
she worked. It wasn't, I mean.
And one thing I kind of thought of after the fact about this is that investigator who came in, obviously no one's responsible but the perpetrators themselves.
Right.
But to me, these people investigating people for fraud and things like that, when you're cornering employees for information,
Right.
and I don't know how they approached Ally, so I don't know that they cornered her, but there needs to be, maybe call employees, get their information and call them separately instead of, because if you're approaching employees doing an investigation, there's other people are going to see it.
Right.
And that is if somebody is really hiding some secrets or some really damning information,
Right.
there's a little bit of culpability from them just showing up to do that and
Right.
doing it so that in a way that everybody else is seeing this.
Exactly.
Or if they can see, other people see Ally's talking to the investigator.
Right. Exactly.
Or, and yes, she did tell James Duffy thinking she could trust him.
Right.
But I still don't think that when they're conducting these investigations that they need to realize it's a very sensitive situation that could get someone
Right.
killed.
Right.
And that's what
did
happened.
In this case.
So that was never brought up at all in anything I saw or watched, but I think that's definitely,
A valid point.
yes.
Yeah.
So to this very day, Cacavelos denies any involvement. He says Duffy did everything and that the only part he had in it was driving Duffy to dispose of her body.
But what would have been Duffy's motive?
Well, exactly.
I mean, let's be real.
And
He,
he says he was under duress, but they played the Walmart tape of him getting the items to clean up, and he buys a magazine and an Almond Joy.
Right.
And he's like, if you're under duress, you're not worried about getting a snack and a magazine.
Right. Right. So he wasn't under duress. He went along with it, and which is sad because it sounds like he did actually consider her a friend.
Well, James Duffy.
But
Now, normally I hate when killers, in particular, make statements in court. But James Duffy did make a statement, but it was very brief. And what he said was, nothing I can say is going to bring her back. There's no excuse for what I did. And that was basically, he just was like, nothing I say is going to make up for it, and that there's just no excuse for my behavior.
Right.
And if you're going to say anything,
that
is probably the best thing you can say.
You can say. Right.
Because he's taking responsibility.
Right.
So in exchange, James Duffy ends up getting 18 to life. So
Okay. Depending on his behavior.
And I believe, obviously, there's a possibility of parole.
Right.
Whereas Cacavelos, I believe, just got life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Which makes sense.
So, yeah, and I think that that's appropriate. Both of these men are really terrible, but
right.
on the overall scale of shittiness,
right.
I think Cacavelos is more
he put
is more
everything into
shitty.
motion.
Yeah. He's more
He put everything into motion. It would have not ever happened had it been.
and he he knew he
for
could manipulate James Duffy.
Right,
So,
and he did.
and yeah, so that's the story of the murder of Ally Lamont.
Very sad.
And just horrible. Not something you hear about every day where
No.
an employee is killed because of their boss's fraudulent activities.
No, definitely not.
All right, so now it's Laura's turn.
Yes, I'm gonna dive right in. My case, I believe, will be much shorter, but equally as sad. So, my case took place in January of 2007. January 5th was kind of the initial day of this case. Okay, so this is in regards to Jodi Sanderholm or Soderholm. Soderholm?
Probably Soderholm.
It's Soderholm, but I wrote Satterholm. I don't know why, but I think it's Soderholm. Anyways, she's described brown hair, brown-eyed, beautiful girl, college dancer, living at home. And because she's this college dancer, sometimes that does bring wanted attention and unwanted attention. She's got a best friend, Lori. She's got a boyfriend, Owen. Owen, head over heels for her. She's going to marry him someday. They're really, very serious. So anyways, so everything's going really well. And then they just start noticing kind of, strange, suspicious kind of things happen. One night she and her friend are walking out of dance practice. And there are, and Jodi gets in her car. And then Lori, the best friend, sees this car behind her and she's thinking, well, that's really strange, but whatever. After a while, she realizes it's following her. She tries to lose them. She can't. She's, they're zipping down dirt roads and every kind of road. And finally, she's like, I can't lose this guy. And so she drives to the police station, sits in the parking lot, debates filing a report. She's like, if I file a report, he had driven away at that point because she was at the police station. She's debating filing a report because if I file a report, what am I going to say? This truck followed me. I have no description of anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she debated filing a report, but after the car disappeared, she waited a bit and then she sped home. And they're just noticing, when they're in the parking lots at the practice and at school, they're, just feeling like they're being watched. They see this truck kind of in the distance all the time, and it's just creepy. They're feeling really kind of creepy. So anyways, so Jodi's feeling edgy. So January 5th comes around.
This is 2007.
This is 2007, yes. So she's home. It's the night before a big game. So January 4th. Let's go to January 4th. It's the night before a big game. She's nervous. She sees her mom. Mom's like, do you want to have lunch tomorrow? She says, no, I've got this big game the next day that I choreographed, and I'm not going to have time for that. But then mom convinces her, okay, well, just come by for a cup of coffee. And she's like, okay, we'll do some coffee. Quick coffee. I can probably handle that. So the next day comes around, January 5th. While at practice, okay, so they're getting out of practice on January 5th, and Lori is walking up to her car, and Jodi's like, I'm going to go take a shower. And Lori's like, okay, go take your shower. And Lori's walking up to her car, and she realizes she has a flat tire. Oh my gosh, that really stinks. So she's she's trying to call and figure out what to do. A man comes up named Jake and says, hey, do you need some help? And of course, because they're being followed, kind of watched or whatever, she's feeling kind of creepy about it. She's like, oh, why is this guy suddenly here?
Yeah.
To help. And so she's like, okay, well,
That's what Buffalo Bill did.
that's what Buffalo Bill
Oh,
did.
no, that's what
No.
not Tom Brady.
What? Tom Brady did not do anything like that.
No, strike that from the record.
Strike it from the record. Yes.
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. There we got it. Yes. Yes, that's the kind of thing Ted did. Yes.
Ted Bundy. Not
Yes.
Tom Brady.
Yes, but the Tom Brady did not do things like that, to my knowledge. To my knowledge. So
Wait,
yeah,
because
so she's
Buffalo Bill would pretend to be handicapped.
right,
but-
or that he needed some help with that we saw in the Silence of the Lambs movie,
Which isn't real.
which isn't real, but it's the kind of thing he did. Like he would be like, "Oh, help me," and then he would put them into the back of a van or.
But
Yeah.
Ted Bundy's ammo was more to
His ammo?
ammo like
His ammo.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you said his ammo. Okay. I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. Okay. No, that's okay. So Ted Bundy. Yeah, this was more Ted Bundy-ish. I mean, it would have been, but Jake
is not Ted Bundy.
is not Ted Bundy, and he turns out to be a good guy. He's like, I've got a daughter. I'd want someone to help my daughter.
Okay.
But he did let her know that it looks like the tire's been slashed intentionally. Like, this isn't just a
Yeah.
flat tire. Like, something's right. And then she started feeling really weird. Like, someone's been following me, and now my tire's been slashed. And then she finally sees the car that's been following her in the edge of the parking lot. And it's this guy named Justin Thurber. And she knows that it's like this guy that has hung out with her brother before. They're not good friends, but he's hung out with the brother. She knows who he is. Like,
Okay.
And she's feeling really weird about it. Anyways. So as this is happening... Oh, what?
Sorry, FYI, her name is Jodi Sanderholm.
Sanderholm. It
Yeah.
wasn't Soderholm. Sanderholm. Oh my gosh, I wrote this wrong. Sanderholm.
I just figured
okay,
I would
thank you.
correct that
Thank you. Thanks
because-
for correcting that. It is important, and I do intend. I always try to get
Sometimes
things correct,
when
but
you're
I'm
listening
writing
to
and
audio,
listening.
that you don't know exactly what they say. It's not like they spell out the name on,
Yeah,
various shows and things. So.
They don't sometimes.
But if you're looking into this further, it's
Sanderholm.
Sanderholm.
I wrote out Satterholm. Okay. So, while this is happening, though, at the school with the tire, Jodi has already gone home from her shower. So, she must have parked in a different part of the parking lot. Jodi goes home while Lori's dealing with this tire problem. Well, she...
And who's Lori again? Her friend?
Lori's the best friend.
Okay.
So Lori's dealing with this tire problem. Her tire's been slashed. So Lori, in the meantime, Jodi goes home, and she hops out of her car to grab the mail, and is kidnapped. Like somebody is in right there and pulls her into her car.
Into their car? Or
Into her car.
Okay.
They pull her into her car and insist that she drive. And the captor is continually driving, and so he drives from Arkansas to Oklahoma. She's begging to go home. She's like, I won't tell anyone. In the meantime, Lori is looking for Jodi. She went to her house. Jodi's not there. Lori goes to her mom's shop because she was going to stop there for coffee. She's not there. Her very pregnant other daughter, so it would be Jodi's sister, Jennifer, tries to call her, thinking, okay, because I'm super pregnant. You know what I mean? I'm 9 months pregnant. She's going to answer because she's so excited.
yeah.
She's going to think baby's here. Doesn't work. She doesn't answer. So finally, Lori tells Cindy about what's going on. Like, they're being followed. They feel like they're kind of being followed.
Who's Cindy?
Tells mom. Tells Jodi's mom.
Mom.
Cindy's Jodi's mom. Okay. So Lori tells Jodi's mom, Cindy's Jodi's mom, what's been going on, and that they've been being followed, and she's been, and that they've been feeling real jumpy, and it's them and some other dancers, and they're really freaked out. So mom finally calls the police. This is another case where they acted really quickly. So they determined that her boyfriend is on break in Texas. He's from Texas, and they're on winter break, and he's in Texas. But the note that Lori, said the last time she saw him, he seemed a little jealous. Like he made a comment like "you're mine" or something, something like that. So, of course, right away they want to talk to him. In the meantime, the captor is taking Jodi to a wildlife area by knife. And this is on the border of Oklahoma and Kansas, this wildlife area. He raped and beat her for hours. Then he makes her walk. She's complying to save her life. He strangles her. She'll regain consciousness. Strangles her again, consciousness. And he does this multiple times to the point she's begging to die because she knows that is her only escape. It's to die. Okay, at this point, after this happens, 24 hours has passed. Police are trying to locate her car.
Right.
And they're driving in town in Arkansas, and they're driving the country roads. And they're wondering, in the meantime, if she could have gone home to Texas with her serious boyfriend, Owen. They're thinking, that would make sense if that's why she's missing. So they find Owen, who agrees to come back to Arkansas. He just insists he doesn't know where she is. Finally, they verify his alibi with receipts and cell phone records. They really gave him the third degree, though. They really put it to him. But yeah, no, I don't know. And finally, they figured out he really was in Texas where he said he was. One thing to note that for a lot of these officers, this was their first abduction, their first case like this. So they wanted to get everything right, and they jumped on it very quickly and dotted their I's, crossed their T's. But it didn't take long for them to realize, well, they can't find the vehicle anywhere. She's probably been abducted with the car, or that's a possibility. And finally, they interview Lori, who tells them about Justin Thurber. So, of course, they're going to bring him in for an interview.
And so what was the deal with Justin Thurber again? Did she know him?
Well, they were acquaintances. So they were like loose acquaintances. Lori knew him because he was her brother's age, and they had hung out, the brother and her. So he was just an area guy who they all knew of him. But they didn't hang out with him. So he was like
obsessive over
college dancers.
Oh, so it wasn't just her in particular necessarily?
No, it was a bunch of like any college dancer. He was that's why he slashed the one tired, but kidnapped the other one. Like, he was just after, they don't even know all of the people he could have been following. Like, he was just... He was
So-
determined to do this. That's the thing is, I think, would it have been her, or I think it was a crime of he saw an opportunity, while he was stalking, where he could do it.
Mhm.
Like she was alone, her car was right there. He saw the opportunity, he took it, and so it could have been any of them. I'm thinking.
So that's why, because I'm thinking when you first said he pulled her into the car, I was like, well, did she know this guy, or was he wearing a
No, I don't know that he was wearing a.
disguise?
I don't know.
But at that point, I guess he doesn't maybe care either
I
way.
don't think he cared. I think he was very determined, like, that's what I'm gonna do. This is what I'm gonna do. It's very sexually motivated. Like, I'm going to take a girl. I don't think it had to be her particularly. It had to be specifically a dancer. Like, any one of them
That's
would have done.
horrible.
Yeah, it's awful. It is awful. So they get Justin. Justin's like, my alibi. I was fishing I was at the local fishing hole or at a fishing lake. I got stuck. My dad came to pick me up. Dad backs up his story. Dad says, yes, I did go pick him up. He got stuck. I went and picked him up. In the meantime, they found via the GPS that the car was at this wildlife area. They searched and they did not find her till day 4. They finally found her body under a pile of brush. And of course, they found blunt force trauma, that she was strangled, raped, sodomized. They carefully removed each piece of debris, took swabs, and they were able to obtain a weak DNA sample. They sent that to the GBI specialty lab. Of course, Mom was describing it, they're just devastated. They're zombies. They just couldn't believe at all what was happening. It was just not registering. They were just completely discombobulated. Finally, they found her car was submerged in the state lake that was nearby. And they were able to pull a hair from the scene. Also, they obtained camera footage of all of the parking lot cameras at that college. And they found Justin Thurber following all of the dancers. Like,
What a nut.
all of them, like in the background, just, like all of them. So it wasn't just them, it was all of them. And in the end, the friends that he listed, that he mentioned that he was fishing with, do not back up his alibi. They actually said we wouldn't be caught dead being seen with him, ever.
So, okay, so he was a
So,
creep.
yeah, so he was very creepy in that way. Like, must have always been really creepy in that way. Well, I mean, he had hair at the time, but yes.
I just showed her a picture
Yes,
of him,
yeah,
which she's seen a picture of him, I'm sure,
Yeah,
but
yeah, he had hair before.
he's very...
But he's distinctive looking, too. That's the other thing. He's kind of a
Ugh.
distinctive looking.
I was going to say, why don't you just try to date a dancer?
Right.
Like, legitimately, but I don't know that anyone would date that guy.
No. So they find him doing all this stuff. So, of course, he lawyers up. He ultimately was found guilty, but never admitted guilt. He was sentenced to death. Justin said he would confess if they took the death penalty off the table. Family refused. They said no. I mean,
well,
what?
It's Arkansas, too.
Right.
So they're
No.
more likely... And I'm not saying, like, obviously...
I won't give our opinion,
I-
but
I think when it's your own child, your views on that, it's possible that they could change.
oh gosh, yeah.
So I have
absolutely.
no judgment on
No,
that at all.
Absolutely not. No, definitely I can't judge that. But they said no because what's the point in him confessing? We already know,
He did it.
that he did it and she's
That it
gone.
was horrible.
Right, and that it was horrible. So what's the point in doing that?
makes
What's
sense.
the point of the confession?
Well, and there's a torture aspect to this case.
Right.
To me, like when you're talking about like the death penalty versus life in prison,
Right.
when she's begging him to kill her, that's
Right.
pretty.
She's pretty
He's really
hurting her. I mean, it's so much pain. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure she was in just the worst kind of pain. She wanted to be done with it. So the family, of course, they're working on stalking laws. And they were able to pass Jodi's law, which toughens the stalking laws. The dancers, it sounds like, at least from what Lori said, that, they might have come forward or gone to the police had they had any real protections, or had they known that they had real protections.
Well, part of the issue with stalking, too, is a lot of times you hear, people call the police that, oh, I have a stalker. And let's be honest here, it's typically women, although that's not to say it can't be the other way around, because it absolutely can.
Right.
But in this case, women call the police, and the police say, well, did they hurt you physically?
Right.
Did they touch you?
Right.
And it's like, so I have to get to the point, like, you need them to do something to hurt me before you're going to help me?
Right, and a lot of the local and state, federal laws or I'm not sure about federal, but local and state laws are that way.
And so, to me, it needs to be something where, like, if you can prove that this person's repeatedly stalking you, that should be enough.
Right. Well, and it should be, but at the same time, it's like, that's I hate to play devil's advocate, but what if it's just a coincidence that Bob happens to be in a couple stores?
Well, that's why I said repeatedly.
Right. It has to be something you can prove, though.
And then, if you have a Ring doorbell camera, bring that up again, and so someone's
got repeatedly at your door.
You have cell phone. I mean, you could probably fairly easily
this day and age
prove someone stalking you.
This day and age, that's the thing. At this time,
at that time, no, that's true.
You couldn't, but this made it easier so that you could report it and they will follow up on it. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you're just reporting it and they're like, oh, well, they didn't do anything, go away,
Because if more dancers had reported it, they might have been able to narrow it down to him.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have one guy stalking multiple women. That's more...
Right. They're going to do something about it. He might not get a bunch of time in jail, but he'll stop the act. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, maybe not.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Like, for the time being.
Well, when he's in jail, yes.
Yeah, or when he's in jail, but, he then knows that he's on someone's radar, and maybe I should stop this. Or I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe stalkers can't stop themselves. I don't know. I'm not a stalker, but that's... Anyways, what I did find out is in 2018, the lawyers argued that he was developmentally disabled and death penalty was postponed. So it's hard to say whether they're going to take that case up again and what's going to end up happening. But and he was found to be developmentally disabled.
See, and then there's a kind of and I don't know to what degree this man was developmentally disabled. He kind of appeared that way in his picture.
Right.
Even.
He did.
So then it comes to, like, did the system kind of failed too? Because developmentally disabled adults need to have some kind of follow through or some kind of you can't just leave a developmentally disabled adult into society to fend for themselves.
Right.
So,
but they do. That's the thing, is there's no real...
I mean, that's why there are
programs,
group homes and things like that.
There are programs, but you have to know about them, and you have to...
Yeah, navigating those, especially if you come from, like, a household where the parents are not, they don't have the resources or the wherewithal, or they're working full time and they'd have no time, or they have really a lot of scenarios in which a lot of these people don't end up with the care. And then now finding out he's developmentally disabled, I don't know about how I feel about the death penalty and that I'm not saying the developmental disability excuses it, but it does provide some kind of a, it's hard to say. Did he know what he was doing was wrong, or were his urges more than he could handle?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
but then
Had
there's
he
the whole
ever-
torture aspect too.
Right. That's the
So-
thing, is he kept doing, you know what I mean? He didn't stop and let her go at any point. But then the other thing too is that I know there is some DNA evidence and they were stopping for testing on that too. So, and none of the articles said whether or not it was found to be his DNA or not. So I'd be interested to know if that does get tested, will it come back as his? You know, I mean, I would imagine it will,
Yeah.
but who knows, you know? I mean, obviously, I think it was pretty obvious he didn't.
Yeah.
You know, just based on all of the circumstances and his stalking of so many women, especially those two women.
And to be able to stalk multiple women and follow them, you can't be so severely. I mean, he's obviously not so developmentally disabled. He obviously
Right.
can drive.
Right, he's driving.
So
Oh yeah,
he
he's
obviously can do certain things functional enough to be able to even perform stalking.
driving. Right.
Like, I know developmentally disabled people that would not be capable, in part because of their disability,
Right.
of stalking a
Stalking
person.
someone.
And they wouldn't even have the intellectual capacity to want to stalk somebody.
Right.
So
like
that-
driving around stalking something.
That kind of gives you an idea that he probably wasn't that severely disabled.
Right. He wasn't disabled to the point maybe that they're saying. You know what I mean? And it's hard. Of course, we can't judge that because we're not involved. But could it be that of course they're going to try to save his life.
Well, yeah.
And that's something they've come up
The
with.
death penalty, it takes, and rightfully so, it takes many, many, many years
Right.
before people are actually
Because
executed.
you should be absolutely, 100% correct. There should be no
even room for error.
no room for any type of error.
Yeah.
It should never happen that somebody is put innocently to death.
No, I mean there's no excuse.
Should never ever happen.
There's no excuse for like collateral damage.
No.
When it comes to that.
Absolutely
at all.
not.
Yeah.
They should then put to death everyone who had a hand in putting him to death. I mean, if we're gonna
Right.
go that way, yeah, eye for an eye. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like if we're gonna be eye for an eye, the people who put those people to death should all be responsible then, and they should
Yeah.
then, you know what I mean? Like that would be the only fair fair thing if we're gonna be that way. But everybody has their own opinions, and I respect everybody's opinions. It's a tough
Yeah.
debate.
I think I'm against it in most situations.
I am as well. I am as well. I'm not a general pro death.
But
penalty
again, if
person.
somebody tortured and hurt my child, or God forbid, killed my child, I may feel differently.
Right.
So.
And that's the thing. And we don't live in a death penalty state anyways.
Right.
But if we did, yeah, I mean, and I'm not a pro deather. I just don't think it really solves anything. What does that solve?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess
I don't.
part of the argument is how long, like the cost of jailing somebody and for that many years, and the fact of, like, if they're not, then they should at least be getting life without the possibility of parole.
Right.
Because
Right. If they've done something
you
that
don't want
awful,
a
yeah.
chance that they could hurt another person. I think
No.
that's what it boils down to.
No, but I guess it's. I don't know. I think it would be I think it would be awful to sit in jail for years and years and years, and you're sitting in jail just for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. There's some people who probably would prefer
Yeah, I just see. I don't know. It's a tough thing, but
The death penalty. Yeah, it's a tough debate. I don't know.
But on that note,
Yes, on that note,
next
we'll say goodbye.
I'm gonna make that email address this week. So next week I should have something if you want to send in a case suggestion or any other feedback. Again,
Yeah,
like we said before, constructive criticisms. I can't talk. Criticism is great,
Yes, it is.
but
don't be super mean because we don't like mean people.
I already said shit like 3 times, so you can
Oh.
say don't be an asshole.
That's going to be my new motto. Motto. My new
And
motto.
how
Motto.
at the end of each episode, don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole. Yeah.
All right,
Well, that
we'll
sums
see
it
you
up. Good night, folks.
next week if we
Yeah.
can get ourselves together by then.
We'll see what happens.
All right, take care.
Life is a highway. Okay, bye.